Namaskaromi, swagatam sarvebhyaha. So welcome back. Now that we've gone through our easier gaṇas, right, the classes 1, 4, 6, and 10, now it's time to roll up our sleeves, so to speak, and head over to those tougher ones, the non-gaṇas. These are going to be the classes 2, 3, 5, 7, 8, and 9. There are several kind of complications that come with conjugating these classes of verbs in the present tense, which makes them ultimately a bit trickier to learn than the gaṇas. So again, like with a lot of Sanskrit grammar, let's be prepared that we're going to get things wrong. We're going to make a few mistakes here and there, but it won't be the end of the world. We're going to also be prepared to learn from those mistakes, right? To keep trying, to keep making corrections when we get things wrong, and to learn broader patterns of what kinds of forms sound right and feel right. That's really the best way to start mastering things like the tricky verb gaṇas. So there are 3 special twists that I want to start off with that we're going to encounter when we start conjugating non-gaṇa verb roots. First, all of these non-gaṇa classes exhibit what's called strong-weak alternation. This means that there are actually 2 different stems that are going to get generated, not just one, which was what we had with the gaṇas. It might sound confusing actually, but it's actually fairly straightforward. There's a strong stem and then there's a weak stem. The strong stem is only going to happen in 3 different endings, whereas all of the other endings take the weak stem. The strong stem is used with the 3 singular endings of the parasmaipada, meaning ti, si, and mi. Right? All the other endings in the parasmaipada and the entire atmanebata conjugation uses the weak stem. And that's it. It's actually not that hard to remember when we're thinking about it. It's just that it's hard to generate the differences between the strong and weak stems. That's where it gets trickier. The second oddity with non-gaṇas is that because you're going to often have stems that end in consonants, and the stems don't end with the letter ad, it's going to require some tricky consonant sandhi when you put on the endings to each verb. The things, right? When you smash them onto the end, you're going to have consonant sandhi. The third oddity is one that actually I forget all the time, if I'm being honest with you. This is that the atmanepada endings are going to become different in the non-gaṇas than the gaṇas. For one, instead of ete and ete in the dual, the non-gaṇas are going to have ate and ate. Another difference is that for the third person plural, it's not ante, it's now ate. That n gets dropped. These 3 differences are only found in the non-gaṇa conjugations and only in the atmanepada. So for example, for the root kr, to do or make, this is an 8th class verb. It gets conjugated both in parasmaipada and atmanepada forms. Now on the atmanepada side, for the duals, we're going to use the weak stem for the root, which is kuru, and then we're going to add ate to make kuruate. The 2 of them do or make. Or kuruate, the 2 of you do or make. The atmanepada third person plural for kru is kuruwate, not kuruwante. They do or make. So if we compare this kuruwate to the third person singular, kurute, you'll notice that there's only a very, very slight difference between the 2 forms. So guess what? This is going to start tripping us up when we encounter third person plurals in the wild, if you're reading the epics, for example. Anyway, there's one other fact about non-gaṇas that I want to point out before we dive right into conjugating these verbs, which is that the Uttama purusha forms, which means the first person forms, right, are not going to have our long a augment that we saw with the gaṇas. It's just going to have the endings directly mi, waha, and maha. They're not going to be ami, avaha, or amaha that we found in the gaṇas. Same thing with the atmanepada. It's just going to be vahe and mahe. It's not avahe and amahe. So with that in mind, let's now dive into the first of our non-gaṇas, which is class 2, and see how the strong and weak stems get formed and how we conjugate. This class is named the Adgana, and it's named for the characteristic root ad, which means to eat. And yes, it's cognate with English eat. They come from the same Indo-European original form. Ad is conjugated as atti. She eats, he eats, it eats. Or admi, I eat. Admaha, we eat, we three or more. So how do we go about conjugating this class 2? The class marker for class 2 is actually nothing. 0. Zilch, nada, empty set. Right? To form the strong stem, you gunate the root and you add this nothing. To form the weak stem, it's even easier. You just take the root and you add nothing. That's it. It's about as easy of a rule as you can muster, right? This is how you get from root to strong stem and weak stem. Where it gets tricky is the next step that we're going to encounter, which is when we add the endings to our strong or weak stem in order to conjugate the verb in the present tense, the lat. If we take a look at our paradigms, what you'll notice is that there are a whole lot of endings that start with consonants. And these verb roots are often going to end with consonants. And guess what? That means when we smash these things together, we're going to have to do internal consonant sandhi. Since I know that you all are now legit superstars of sandhi, I think you're going to have no problem mastering these, but it will take some, kind of meticulousness on your part. The easiest way to do it, though, I think, is just to look at a bunch of different examples. The more examples you see, the better you'll get. The verb with, for example, has 2 different conjugations. We saw actually as a 6th class verb, it meant to find or discover, vindati, right? But there's a class 2 form, which means to know, vid. Here, to get the strong stem, we're going to gunate the root and then add nothing. So you end up with ved as your stem. The weak stem, you just take the root and you add nothing, right? And you get vid. So strong stem is ved, weak stem is vid. Now you add your endings. You get saha veti, he knows. Notice that here the dakara that it ends with has had to lose the voicing to match the unvoiced dakara in your ending ti. Right? The same thing happens with the third person dual, but now we're using the weak stem vid instead of the strong stem ved. So we get vittaha, the 2 of them know. 3 or more no is going to become vidanti. Now the voicing of that dakara, it gets retained, right, because of the vowel so you don't have to do a sandhi. In the second person, it's going to be the same devoicing of the da, so you get tvam vet si, you know. Yuam vittha, the 2 of you know, and yuyam vittha, you 3 or more know. Note that the dual and plurals use the weak stem, and you get that same sandhi as in the third person. In the Uttama purusha, the first person, we're going to have aham ved, me, I know. Awam with waha, the 2 of us know. And wayam with maha, right, we 3 or more know. Notice here that the duals and plurals also are going to use the weak stem again. Vid, not the strong stem, ved, but that because of the voiced consonants va and ma, you retain the voiced dakara, vidmaha, vidvaha. Let's turn to now another common second class verb, watch, which means to speak, a very important verb. Here, since the guna of is right, both the strong and weak stems are going to be the same. It's going to become watch. But now, because it ends in that palatal, there's going to be some intricacies of sandhi. Right? Remember, palatals are kind of radioactive, right? They're unstable particles, and they're going to tend to jump up into velars. When we add the ti of the third person singular ending, the cha is going to turn into gakara, and it becomes wakti. He or she or it speaks. Waktaha, the 2 of them speak. Then with the ending anti, you don't lose the palatal. It stays palatal, and it becomes wachanti. They speak 3 or more. In the second person singular, you have to add the ending si to the strong stem vach, right? Here's something even more peculiar happens. First, the cha becomes a gakara, of course, and then you have vak, right? But then now the dental sibilant s in your ending is going to jump into becoming a retroflex, and we get the form wakshi. Why does that happen? Don't ask me, I'm not actually really sure. All I can tell you is, hey, sandhi rules. The other 2 second person conjugations are easy. Vakta, you 2 speak. And vakta, you all speak. With first person for vach now, because these are nasal and a semivowel, the velar jump doesn't happen, and it'll stay the same. We'll get aham vachmi, I speak, or avam vachvaha, we both speak, and finally vayam vachmaha, we three or more speak. So these are some of the sandhi oddities that you're going to encounter in your class 2 verbs that end in consonants. There are many class 2 roots, and many of them they end in vowels, or they are vowels, like the root E, which means to go. The strong stem of the root E is A. The weak stem is just E. So then you add your endings, and you'll get eti. He, she, it goes. Itaha, the two of them go. Yanti, three or more go. Notice that here the E plus A, because of the anti, forces the E to become the semivowel yakara. For the second person, we're going to see tuam eshi, using our sibilant internal sandhi rule that forces the S to become a retroflex. Then you get ittaha, you two go. And yuyam itta, you all go. Right? For first person, we'll have aham emi, I go. Awam iwaha, wayam imaha, we three or more go. Not too bad, fairly straightforward. They can be all right sometimes, these class 2 verbs. Finally, let's turn to a few irregular roots of class 2. First, there's some verbs we're going to see where an I, a short ikara, gets added to the stem in its formation. For example, there's the root rud, which means to cry, to weep. In the strong stem, we get the gunated form rod, but then you add a short ikara so that it becomes rodi. Similarly, the weak stem, it's going to be the root rud plus the e, so it becomes rudi. So you can say saha roditi, he is crying. The e is going to be there in all the other forms, except for the third person plural where it gets dropped, and you get te rudanti, they are crying. But you will have aham rodimi, I am crying. Vayam rudimaha, we three or more are crying. Another verb that works in the same way is swap, which means to sleep. Swap is both the same in both the strong and weak stem, since the guna of is right? But if you add that I to the stem, again in all forms except for the third person plural, we're going to get saha swapiti, he is sleeping, or she is sleeping, it is sleeping. Swapitaha, the two of them are sleeping, but swapanti, they three or more are sleeping. Aham swapimi, I am asleep, or vayam swapimaha, we sleep. In the case of the root bru, which means to speak, we're going to add now a long E instead of a short E, kara, and only now to the strong stem. So bru first will become bro, and then we add the long E. So we get, after some internal sandhi, we're going to get bravi. This is your strong stem. This is similar to the sandhi we saw when bhu became bhavati, if you remember. O plus long E first breaks down into a plus u plus E. Then the ukara turns into your semivowel vakara. And so we're going to get bravi. And braviti, he, she, or it speaks. The weak stem of bru stays bru with no E added. So we get saha braviti, he is speaking. Tau brutaha, the two of them are speaking. And te bruvanti, they three or more are speaking. Notice here again, an odd internal sandhi, where bru plus anti is going to make that long u become shortened, and then you add your internal, inside you add a semivowel va. So you get bruvanti. Other strong forms also will have this long e. Tuam bravishi, you are speaking, with again the long e triggering your retroflex s sandhi rule. Aham bravimi, I say. Vayam brumaha, we three or more speak or say. Okay, so I imagine you're now kind of tired of the irregularities and exceptions that you're finding in class 2, but there are two very important second-class verbs that we shouldn't skip over before we wrap up our segment. The first is maybe the most common verb of them all, which is the verb us, right? Which means to be or exist. It's a second-class verb. The strong stem here is us, since the guna of is But the weak stem now isn't us again, as you might expect. Instead, the vowel is going to drop off completely. And so we get just the letter S, the sakara, as your weak stem, with a virama underneath, right? The conjugation after that is actually quite regular. We've already gone over it in the early videos, right? asti, he, she, or it is. Tau stah, the two of them are. Te santi, they are. Tvam asi, you are. Yuam stah, right? You two are. Yuyam stah, you three or more are. Then in the first person, aham asmi, I am, right? Yuam swaha, we two are. And you, avam smaha, we all are. So irregular weak stems, but straightforward when you're adding the endings. So if you're ready for a challenge, then here's the second class verb, hun, which means to strike or kill or harm, right? The strong stem is going to stay hun, but the weak stem now does three different things in three different situations, actually. It either stays hun in the case of the first person dual and plural, it becomes just huh in the case of the second and third person, or in the case of the third person plural, it'll collapse into a conjunct cluster gaṇa. So for the third person singular, we get sa, saha, sa, tat, hanti, she kills, he kills, it kills. There's no problem with that. Tvam becomes honsi. The N is now a nasal anuswara, honsi, you kill. Aham hanmi, I kill. The duals, now weird things are going to happen. For third person dual, the N drops, and we get hataha. They too are killing. Same for the second person, the N drops, and you get hataha. You too are killing. The N stays, though, in the first person dual, and we get hanwaha. We too are killing. Now for the third person plural, we're going to get this very strange form, gaṇanti. Here the appearance of the ga is totally weird. It might seem so, but it's actually an archaism from an earlier Proto-Indo-European stage of this word. But anyway, for us, it's just something we have to remember. Te gaṇanti. They strike, slay, kill. It's kind of an interesting word. The others are easier. Yuyam hata. The N is going to drop like the duals. And wayam hanmaha. We all are killing. Okay, so with that violence, let's take a break. And when we come back, we'll look at one of the easier of the non-gaṇas, which is the fifth class known as the su-gaṇa. Right, till then, thank you for watching. See you next time. Punarmilamaha. Dhanyawadaha.